Sometimes the most dangerous thing is saying one more word, because it could be the moment you lose her forever, or finally hold her close. I never thought a simple glance could carry so much weight until that afternoon. The room was quiet, a small, tucked-away bookstore where the scent of worn paper and polished wood mingled in the air. I was drifting through the aisles, fingers brushing over spines of forgotten stories, when I noticed her across the room. She wasn't just another face in the crowd. There was a calm confidence in the way she moved, an ease that seemed born from years of navigating a world that didn't always slow down for people like her. She was in her early 40s, but there was something timeless about her, a grace that wasn't about youth, but about knowing herself. Her hair caught the light in soft waves, and her eyes, a shade of green the first couldn't quite name, held something deep and unreadable. We didn't speak, at least not with words. Our eyes met briefly, the kind of look that hangs between two people like a fragile thread, unspoken but charged. I felt my breath catch, like the space between us suddenly filled with something electric. It was as if she saw right through the surface of me, the nervousness I usually kept tucked away, and for a moment I wondered if she recognized the same hesitation in herself. The air between us seemed to pulse with possibilities. Her lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if she was on the verge of saying something but held back. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but something stopped me. A quiet respect for the distance she kept, or maybe the fear of breaking the fragile balance we had unknowingly created. My fingers brushed against the spine of a book, and she stepped closer, reaching for the same title. Our hands nearly touched, a fraction of an inch apart. I could feel the warmth of her skin through the thin fabric of my sleeve, a subtle invitation and a warning all at once. The moment stretched, delicate and tense, before she withdrew her hand with a softness that spoke volumes. There was a scent that clung to her, something warm and familiar, like vanilla and old books mixed with a hint of something floral and mysterious. It stayed with me long after she turned away, leaving the room feeling colder in her absence. I walked away with my heart unexpectedly heavy, weighed down by the unspoken connection that neither of us dared to name. I kept replaying the moment in my mind, her eyes searching, hesitant but hopeful, and mine responding with the same mix of curiosity and caution. That first encounter was a quiet beginning, a fragile dance of distance and desire, where words were unnecessary, and yet everything was left unsaid. It was the kind of meeting that promises more, but asks you to be patient, to wait and see if the next moment will bring the courage to say what the heart already knows. For now, it was enough to feel that silent pull between us, an invisible thread woven from shared loneliness and a tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something worth holding on to. After that first unspoken meeting, it felt like the world had quietly shifted. The bookstore remained the same, the warm light filtering through the windows, the scent of paper and coffee blending in the background. But now, every time I saw her, the air between us seemed charged with possibility. We began to cross paths more often, not by chance, but almost as if some invisible thread was drawing us closer. There were the quiet mornings at the little cafe where she sat alone, sipping black coffee, her eyes distant yet alert. I found myself lingering nearby, pretending to read a newspaper, stealing glances at the subtle way her fingers curled around the cup. The warmth radiating from her hands was like a quiet invitation, a small comfort in the chilly morning air. Sometimes our encounters were brief, just a nod, a shared smile that held something more than politeness. Other times, we found ourselves standing side by side in line or on the park bench as autumn leaves drifted lazily to the ground. In those moments, our eyes would meet again, the tension between us folding into the spaces of silence. She spoke little, but when she did, her voice was low and measured, carrying the weight of experience and quiet strength. One afternoon, as the golden sun dipped toward the horizon, she shared a small detail from her life, something simple, almost casual, but it held a tenderness that surprised me. It was a crack in her armor, a glimpse into a world she usually kept hidden. I listened with a growing sense of awe and care, feeling that this was more than chance. It was an invitation to something deeper. Yet, there was always hesitation in her eyes, a flicker of doubt, as if she was testing the waters, unsure if the fragile connection could withstand the weight of reality. Our interactions became a dance of near touches and fleeting closeness. Once, as she reached for her scarf, our hands brushed briefly, just a whisper of contact, but it sent a ripple of warmth through me, like the softest flame flickering to life. She didn't pull away, but neither did she close the gap. It was a delicate balance, a slow unfolding that demanded patience and care. The park around us buzzed softly with life. The rustling of leaves, the distant laughter of children, the scent of damp earth after an early rain. It all seemed to fade when our eyes locked, creating a private world where time slowed and every glance carried a message. There was a subtle pull, a silent conversation in the way her eyes lingered on mine, the small smile that curved her lips when she thought I wasn't watching. I felt a growing warmth inside, a quiet hope that maybe, beneath the guarded surface, there was room for something real. But beneath that hope was also a cautiousness, an unspoken understanding that the path ahead was uncertain. We were both careful not to rush, as if aware that the moment was fragile and the slightest wrong move could shatter it. And so we continued, two souls circling closer with every shared glance, every exchanged word left unsaid, caught in the slow, beautiful tension of a connection that promised everything without rushing toward a conclusion. There was a shift that day, a subtle change in the way she carried herself, something quieter, more fragile beneath the usual calm. We met again, this time on a park bench beneath a canopy of late summer leaves, their golden edges trembling softly in the breeze. The air held the warmth of fading sunlight, the kind of light that seems to hold its breath, waiting for something unspoken. She was different in that moment, less guarded. I noticed how her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her scarf, the way her gaze flickered toward the ground before returning to mine. The usual confident mask softened, revealing a hint of the weight she carried beneath. Then, almost hesitantly, she began to speak, quietly, carefully, about a loss she had long carried with her. It wasn't a story full of drama or sharp edges, but a gentle unraveling of a part of herself she rarely showed. I listened as she described a love that had slipped away, not with anger or bitterness, but with a tender sadness that lingered like a faint ache. Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor beneath it, like a fragile thread barely holding together a piece of her heart. For a moment, the world around us seemed to fade. The distant hum of city life, the rustle of leaves, the occasional bark of a dog, all of it blurring into a quiet backdrop for this rare glimpse inside her soul. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap between us, but I held back, sensing the delicacy of the moment. Instead, I offered what I could, my presence. My silence became a steady anchor, a quiet promise that I was here, willing to listen without judgment, without expectation. The warmth of the late afternoon sun brushed against her skin as she shifted slightly closer. Our shoulders almost touched, and I felt the slow pulse of her breath mingling with mine, a fragile intimacy growing in the space between us. She glanced up, eyes meeting mine, searching for something, acceptance, maybe a reassurance. I saw the flicker of vulnerability she tried so hard to hide, and it moved something deep inside me. "I don't usually talk about this," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not easy." I nodded, understanding more in that moment than any words could express. There was a history here, a story marked by loss and hesitation, but also by quiet resilience. And despite the pain, despite the hesitations, there was something in her, something alive and hopeful, that drew me in like a magnet. For a brief second, my hand hovered close to hers, a silent offer of comfort and connection. She didn't pull away, but neither did she take it. It was as if we both understood that this fragile space needed time, that some wounds aren't healed with a single touch, but with patience and care. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the park, we sat in that gentle silence. Two souls quietly reaching toward something new, fragile, and deeply real. It was a moment of vulnerability neither of us could forget. The first true step toward a connection built not just on attraction, but on trust. The air between us had been growing thicker with unspoken feelings, a delicate tension simmering just beneath the surface. That afternoon, as the late sun cast long shadows across the cafe, where we had quietly met again, something changed. A sharp edge cut through the soft glow of our usual moments. We were sitting across from each other at a small table, the scent of freshly brewed coffee weaving through the stillness. She had been quieter than usual, her eyes distant yet intense, like she was wrestling with a storm inside her. I could feel it too, the pull, the hesitance, and the growing desire tangled with fear. Then she looked up, her gaze locking on mine with a sudden, fierce clarity I hadn't seen before. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but heavy with a warning. "One more word," she said slowly, "and I won't let you go." The word struck me like a sudden chill, both a promise and a threat. It wasn't anger or resentment. There was something far more complex beneath it. A fragile vulnerability wrapped in steel, a desperate need to protect herself from being hurt again, and yet an almost silent plea for me to understand. In that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Her hand reached out, brushing briefly against mine, a fleeting touch that was both a boundary and an invitation. I could feel the tension radiating off her like heat, and my heart thundered in response. I wanted to speak, to reach through the layers of caution she had built, but the warning in her eyes stopped me. It was a line I couldn't cross, not yet. There was too much history, too much pain hidden beneath her calm exterior. She looked away, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup, the tremor in her hands betraying the strength she tried to project. I realized that this warning wasn't just about me. It was about everything she feared to lose again. The possibility of opening up, only to have it ripped away. The silence between us grew heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, a fragile tension that spoke louder than any words could. We both understood that this moment was a crossroads, an unspoken challenge to be patient, to prove that what was forming between us could withstand the shadows of her past. The cafe around us faded into a blur. All I could see was her, the strength, the vulnerability, the fierce protectiveness woven into her every gesture. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't going anywhere, that I was willing to wait as long as it took, but instead, I simply nodded, letting my quiet understanding speak for me. Her eyes flicked back to mine, softer now, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. The warning lingered, but so did a spark of hope, a delicate promise that maybe, if I chose my words carefully and moved with patience, she might one day let me stay. As the sun slipped behind the buildings, casting the room in twilight, I realized that this was no longer just a game of glances and quiet touches. The stakes had been raised, and the dance between us had deepened into something far more intense, a slow-burning tension that neither of us could deny. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope stretched thin between hope and fear. Our connection was no longer just about chance encounters or lingering glances. It had become a delicate dance, where every step mattered, every movement carefully measured. I was caught between the urge to close the distance and the need to respect the boundaries she'd set so clearly. Her warning echoed in my mind like a refrain. "One more word, and I won't let you go." It wasn't just a threat. It was a plea, wrapped in layers of vulnerability and guarded strength. I could feel the weight of it pressing on me every time our eyes met, every time our hands hovered close but didn't quite touch. We fell into a rhythm that was equal parts tantalizing and frustrating. The cafe where we met became a quiet stage for our silent conversations. Subtle gestures, fleeting touches, the warmth of proximity without crossing the invisible line she'd drawn. I watched the way her fingers traced absent patterns on the table, how her breath caught when my hand brushed lightly against hers. Those moments sparked a gentle fire inside me, an ache for closeness that I kept carefully contained. I could sense her hesitation too, the way she pulled back when I moved just a little too close, her eyes searching mine for reassurance before allowing herself to relax. It was a quiet negotiation, a constant balancing act between longing and restraint. We were both holding back, afraid that rushing forward might shatter what fragile connection we'd built. But even within the restraint, there was tenderness. A brush of hair tucked behind her ear, the way she let her shoulder rest lightly against mine when we sat side by side, the soft smile that appeared when our hands accidentally met. Those small, intimate moments said more than words ever could. They were promises whispered in the language of touch and presence, quiet affirmations that we were slowly, cautiously building something real. Yet beneath the warmth, doubt lingered like a shadow. I wondered if my patience was enough, if my silence was heard as respect or indifference. I worried that my hesitation might push her away just as surely as reckless words could. And still, I trusted the slow unfolding of this fragile bond, knowing that true intimacy required time, patience, and the courage to be vulnerable in ways neither of us had dared before. Outside, the world moved fast, people rushing by, lives unfolding in bursts of noise and chaos. But in those quiet moments with her, time slowed to a gentle pulse. It was just us, two souls cautiously reaching toward each other in the soft light of evening. And so, I held my breath, waiting for the moment when she might let go of her fears, when the dance of hesitation would give way to something more certain. Until then, I would cherish every whispered touch, every lingering glance, knowing that sometimes the most profound love begins in the spaces between words. The moment came quietly, without fanfare or grand declarations. It was in the gentle stillness of a late evening, the kind of silence that feels full rather than empty. We found ourselves sitting close, her head resting lightly against my shoulder, the soft rhythm of our breaths weaving together in the darkened room. For so long, words had been the barrier, unspoken fears, hesitations, and the walls we built to protect ourselves. But tonight something shifted. Her fingers traced slow, hesitant circles on my arm, a subtle gesture filled with trust and tentative hope. I could feel the pulse beneath her skin, steady yet fragile, as if this small touch was a bridge spanning the distance between two guarded hearts. She finally spoke, her voice low and uncertain, carrying the weight of everything she had kept hidden. She told me of the loneliness that had settled into her bones, the scars left by love lost, and the fear of opening herself to pain again. There was no bitterness in her words, only a quiet vulnerability that made the air between us hum with honesty. Listening to her, I felt my own walls begin to crumble. I shared pieces of myself, not with bravado or certainty, but with the same raw honesty she offered. The stories of my own doubts and hopes filled the space, weaving a tapestry of shared understanding and connection. Her breath caught softly as she leaned into me, the warmth of her cheek against my chest grounding us in the present. The world outside faded away, the hum of distant traffic, the flicker of streetlights, even the ticking of the clock, all irrelevant compared to the fragile intimacy growing between us. In that moment, our fears seemed to dissolve, replaced by something gentler and stronger, the recognition that we were not alone. The tentative touches became more assured, her hands slipping into mine, fingers intertwining with a quiet certainty. There was no rush, no pressure, just a mutual promise to be patient, to nurture the delicate bond that was blossoming. I felt the weight of her trust, and it settled over me like a warm blanket on a cold night. The distance that had seemed so vast was suddenly bridged by the simplest of acts, a shared breath, a whispered confession, the soft press of lips against a forehead. We didn't need more words. The silence now spoke volumes, a testament to the emotional safety we had carved out together. It was in this quiet space that the true power of our connection revealed itself. Not in grand gestures, but in the subtle, everyday moments where two people choose to be seen, understood, and held. As the night deepened, I knew this was no fleeting spark, but something that could grow, slowly, patiently, into a love defined by respect, tenderness, and the courage to face vulnerability side by side. The night settled around us like a soft, familiar blanket. We sat side by side on the worn wooden bench beneath a sky dotted with hesitant stars. The city's distant hum softened to a gentle whisper. The world beyond this moment, the noise, the rush, the expectations, felt distant, almost irrelevant. Here, in the quiet space we had created, there was only us. Her hand found mine slowly, tentatively, as if testing the waters of a new trust. When our fingers intertwined, it was not just skin meeting skin. It was a silent promise, a vow unspoken but deeply felt. The tension that had once held us apart softened into a gentle warmth, a steady comfort that wrapped around us like a quiet embrace. She didn't speak, and neither did I. Words felt unnecessary, even risky. Sometimes the most profound truths are held in silence. Instead, I felt the subtle pressure of her hand, the slight squeeze that said more than anything spoken aloud. Her eyes met mine, and in their depths, I saw a reflection of the same mix of hope and hesitation that had defined our journey. There was a softness to her smile that hadn't been there before, a quiet acceptance, a readiness to let go of old fears and a trust in something new. The lines that had once marked distance between us now felt like the gentle folds of a well-loved book, stories written in every crease, every pause. As the cool night air brushed against our faces, I reached up, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. My fingers lingered for a moment, tracing the curve of her cheek in a gesture both tender and reverent. It was a touch that spoke of respect, of admiration, not just for her beauty, but for the strength and vulnerability she had shown. She leaned into the touch, her breath warm against my skin, and I felt the steady beat of her heart beneath my palm. It was the quiet steadiness of someone who had weathered storms and was now choosing to stand beside me, not as a shield, but as a partner. We sat like that for a while, wrapped in the kind of peace that comes from being truly seen and accepted. There was no rush to fill the silence, no pressure to define what came next. Our story was no longer about unspoken warnings or fragile hesitations. It was about the promise of something real, built slowly and carefully, with patience and care. In that moment, I realized that love like this doesn't need to be loud or hurried. It thrives in the spaces between words, in the lingering glances, the gentle touches, and the shared silences that speak volumes. And as the night deepened, I knew that whatever the future held, we had found something worth holding on to, a quiet, enduring connection that neither time nor fear could break. Her hand tightened around mine, and with that simple gesture, the promise was sealed. No more warnings, no more hesitations, only the steady, unfolding journey of two hearts choosing to stay together.